Are you drained by the emotions of others? Do people's moods dictate your happiness, leaving you powerless and exhausted? Today, we uncover what truly happens when an empath heals, not just emotionally but strategically, and what unstoppable power they quietly gain. Imagine for a moment standing in a crowded room, a place where anger, envy, joy, and despair swirl like an unseen storm. To most, it is chaos. To the unhealed empath, it is suffocating. Every word, every glance, every subtle shift in tone pierces them like arrows, invisible but lethal. Their mind races to respond, to soothe, to absorb, to save, and yet they feel powerless, consumed by the currents of everyone else's emotional tides. This is the prison of the unhealed empath, a prison without walls, where the chains are made of feelings not their own. But mastery begins when they recognize this very prison for what it is. A healed empath learns, above all else, that emotions are neither enemies nor masters, they are instruments. Each feeling they encounter, whether it is rage, sorrow, or joy, is a signal, a piece of intelligence, to be read, interpreted, and leveraged. The anger of one person is no longer a personal attack, it is a map of their desires, a guide to understanding their weaknesses, their motivations. The sadness of another does not drain them, it becomes an insight into what they value, what they fear losing. The unhealed empath suffers with others, the healed empath understands others, and understanding is power. Understanding is control. Mastery of emotions is not achieved overnight. It begins with observation, a quiet and deliberate practice of watching without reacting. The healed empath watches a crowd as a general surveys a battlefield, noting where tensions rise, where alliances form, where vulnerabilities are hidden beneath forced smiles. They notice the subtle twitch of a hand, the fleeting glance of suspicion, the slight hesitation before a word is spoken. These are no longer mere details, they are the language of influence. They read emotions as maps, tracing paths through which they may navigate without being harmed, paths they may even subtly manipulate without detection. But observation alone is not mastery. Mastery comes when the empath begins to respond strategically, rather than instinctively. The unhealed empath reacts. They absorb, they soothe, they change themselves to match the emotional environment, often at a personal cost. The healed empath responds. They choose, they adapt, they engage selectively. Every interaction becomes deliberate, every word measured. If someone approaches with hostility, the healed empath does not mirror it. Instead, they reflect calm, or curiosity, or even silence, shifting the emotional current to their advantage. If someone seeks to manipulate through guilt or fear, the healed empath sees it clearly, acknowledging it, but not surrendering to it. In this way, emotions are no longer chains. They are levers, instruments of influence to guide outcomes without force, without aggression, without notice. Visualize this: a crowded marketplace filled with merchants and nobles, all shouting, all negotiating, all vying for advantage. The unhealed empath is trapped, feeling the panic, the greed, the frustration of everyone around them moving erratically, swallowed by the chaos. The healed empath, however, stands at the center, calm and precise. They notice the subtle signs, a hand trembling over a coin, a foot tapping impatiently, a smile forced but false. They understand not just what is happening, but why, and from this understanding they act, not impulsively, not emotionally, but with strategy. They know which conversations to enter, which battles to avoid, which alliances to form, and which energies to simply let pass. The world no longer dictates their feelings, they dictate how the world's emotions interact with them, and as they continue to master their own emotional responses, something extraordinary happens. Their presence alone begins to influence others. Calm radiates where chaos once reigned. Confidence replaces hesitation. The healed empath becomes a stabilizing force, a subtle authority, not through command, but through control of the most powerful and underestimated currency in existence: emotion. They can turn fear into respect, frustration into admiration, and indecision into action, all by first mastering the currents within themselves and then navigating the currents around them. Their mind becomes a fortress, their heart a compass, and their actions a precise blend of empathy and strategy. In the theater of human interaction, most people are actors, performing in the moment, swept away by impulse, by reaction, by the drama of life. The unhealed empath is caught in this performance, unable to separate themselves from the spectacle. They absorb the fear, the pride, the sorrow, the rage of those around them, as if each emotion were theirs by inheritance. They feel every betrayal as personal, every slight as a wound, every disappointment as a collapse of their own world. Their heart becomes the stage, and their mind the scriptwriter of everyone else's drama, until they are no longer themselves, lost in the narratives of others. But strategic detachment changes everything. Detachment is not indifference. It is not coldness, nor apathy, nor avoidance. It is awareness, acute, precise, deliberate. The healed empath understands that the first step to power is perspective. They must see themselves as observers in the arena of human behavior, capable of assessing the patterns, predicting the moves, understanding the strategies employed by others without being drawn into the chaos. Every interaction becomes a study, every conflict a lesson, every exchange a map revealing the hidden desires and fears of those who think themselves invisible. To detach strategically is to stand apart while remaining intimately aware, to be both within the currents and above them. Imagine a royal court, filled with whispers, alliances, betrayals hidden behind polite smiles. The unhealed empath is like a leaf caught in a storm, tossed by every undercurrent, bending to the pressures of ambition, envy, and manipulation. They feel the subtle tension, as if it were an earthquake shaking their foundation. The healed empath, however, stands as the pillar in the center of that storm. They witness the plotting, the deception, the schemes, but they do not flinch, they do not absorb the tremors. They are not blind to the dangers, nor naive to the intentions, but they do not allow themselves to be carried away. They understand that being emotionally swept away is the enemy of strategy, the enemy of power, the enemy of survival. Strategic detachment allows the empath to recognize the differ, NCE, between what is theirs and what is not. Every insult, every attempt to provoke, every subtle manipulation is catalogued, analyzed, and responded to with calculated precision. They no longer react immediately because they have learned that the first reaction is rarely the most effective. Instead, they pause, they measure, they assess the consequences before acting. Their mind becomes a chessboard. Their response is the deliberate moves that shape outcomes in their favor. They learn to enter the emotional battlefield selectively, engaging only when advantage can be gained and withdrawing when engagement would be wasteful or dangerous. Each withdrawal is a victory, each engagement a strategic conquest. The healed empath also learns the art of invisibility. By detaching, they observe without being observed, understanding motives, predicting behavior, uncovering intentions that others wish to conceal. Their presence in a room changes nothing overtly, yet subtly. They influence outcomes simply by seeing clearly. They are the quiet force that guides the currents of emotion and action without ever being noticed. They can steer conversations, diffuse conflict, or redirect attention, all while maintaining a calm, composed exterior. In a world where people fight blindly with their feelings, the detached empath fights with foresight, and foresight is power. Detachment also serves as protection. The healed empath learns that absorbing every energy, every drama, every emotional stow, RM, is destructive. By creating boundaries of awareness, they preserve their vitality while gaining insight into the weaknesses and strategies of others. They can watch a tirade without being enraged, witness manipulation without being manipulated, and sense deceit without being deceived. Their mind becomes the command center, their heart a shield, and their perception a weapon. In the hands of one who has mastered detachment, empathy becomes not a vulnerability, but an advantage, a lens to see what others cannot see, a vantage point that grants clarity and control over situations that would overwhelm the untrained, the unhealed, the reactive. And, as they practice this discipline, as they learn to stand apart while remaining fully aware, they begin to notice something remarkable. Others, lost in their own emotions, begin to reveal their intentions, expose their weaknesses, and act predictably. The healed empath moves among them like a strategist among pawns, knowing where to intervene, when to withdraw, and how to shape outcomes without confrontation. They are never swept into chaos. never dominated by fear or envy, and yet they are always present where influence can be exerted, unseen architects of subtle power in a world of loud, impulsive, and unaware actors. In the uncharted landscape of human relationships, the empath without boundaries is like a castle without walls. Every emotion, every expectation, every demand of others storms through unchecked, leaving exhaustion, resentment, and confusion in its wake. They give endlessly, hoping to be understood, to be appreciated, to be loved, yet find themselves diminished at every turn. Their generosity becomes a weapon turned against themselves, their sensitivity a vulnerability exploited by the careless, the selfish, the manipulative. But boundaries, when established, are not mere fences, they are the tools of sovereignty, the lines that define power and preserve influence. The healed empath understands that the world does not reward endless giving. They understand that to be effective, to be influential, to be truly present, they must first honor the territory of their own mind, their own heart, and their own energy. Every interaction, every engagement, every relationship becomes a negotiation in which the empath is both participant and gatekeeper. They must choose carefully what to allow into their sphere and what to repel with quiet precision. Boundaries are not selfish, they are strategic. They're the armor of wisdom, protecting the empath from emotional depletion while allowing them to act with intention, clarity, and authority. Consider the subtle power of saying no. To the unhealed empath, no is a forbidden word, associated with guilt, shame, and rejection. They fear the disapproval of others more than the cost of their own suffering. But the healed empath wields no with precision. A no is not an act of hostility, it is an assertion of control, a declaration that their energy is finite, their influence valuable, their presence not to be exploited. Each boundary set communicates silently, but unmistakably, that the empath is no longer a passive vessel but an active agent in the design of their own life. Boundaries extend beyond words. They exist in presence, in attention, in engagement. The healed empath learns to choose where to invest their focus, where to lend their heart, and where to remain detached. They recognize when a conversation is draining rather than productive, when an environment is toxic rather than nourishing, and when a relationship demands more than it gives. In these moments, withdrawal is not weakness, but strategy. It is the placement of energy where it can be multiplied rather than wasted, where it can influence outcomes rather than being lost in the chaos of uncontrolled emotional exchange. Every decision to step back is a decision to protect power, to preserve clarity, and to ensure that action remains deliberate rather than reactive. Empowerment through boundaries also transforms influence. Those who once relied on emotional manipulation find their tactics ineffective. The healed empath no longer absorbs guilt, fear, or obligation. They observe and respond selectively. Others, accustomed to bending the empath's will, now encounter resistance, subtle, controlled, unassailable. This resistance is not aggression, it is authority. It signals that the empath is no longer a tool to be used, but a strategist to be respected. Relati. Onships change, environments shift, and the empath gains freedom not through force, but through the quiet imposition of invisible limits that define what they allow and what they refuse. Visualize this as a court of advisors, each competing for attention, each attempting to sway opinion, each eager to bend the empath toward their desires. The unhealed empath is a floodgate, overwhelmed, consumed, lost in obligation. The healed empath is a ruler who has mastered the art of selective engagement. They listen, they weigh, they consider, and then they act only where action aligns with their priorities and preserves their energy. They have learned the subtle language of boundaries, where silence, distance, and refusal communicate far more than words ever could, and where strategic withdrawal becomes a tool of influence as potent as persuasion or charm. Boundaries also sharpen self-knowledge. By defining what they will and will not tolerate, the healed empath uncovers their values, their strengths, and their limits. They come to understand not just who they are, but who they are not willing to be in the service of others. This clarity fuels confidence, transforming the empath from a reactive participant in the world to an architect of their own life, a master of both presence and absence. In mastering boundaries, the empath preserves their most precious resource, attention, and channels it toward outcomes that matter. shaping their environment, their relationships, and ultimately, why their destiny, with subtlety and precision that those who have never been empathic cannot even comprehend. Once an empath has mastered their own emotions, learned strategic detachment, and empowered themselves with boundaries, something remarkable begins to happen. Their sensitivity, once a source of weakness, becomes an instrument of subtle yet undeniable power. They no longer simply react to the currents of the world, they shape them. Every glance, every word, every movement becomes a calculated force capable of steering the perceptions, decisions, and even the actions of those around them. The healed empath has entered the realm of transmutation, turning vulnerability into influence, sensitivity into authority, insight into command. To understand this transformation, one must first recognize the invisible architecture of human behavior. Most people act blindly, driven by impulse, desire, fear, or the unexamined dictates of society. The unhealed empath suffers in the midst of this chaos, unable to see clearly, unable to act decisively, carried along by the emotional storms of others. The healed empath, however, sees beneath the surface. They observe the patterns, the subtle cues, the unspoken intentions, and from this observation they derive strategy. Their sensitivity becomes a radar, detecting the slightest shifts in mood, the quietest signals of ambition, the hidden fractures in relationships and hierarchies. Where others see complexity, they see opportunity. Influence emerges naturally from this clarity. The healed empath speaks with precision, listens with intent, and acts with subtlety. They need not raise their voice or assert authority loudly. Their insight alone grants them power. A single well-placed observation can redirect a conversation. A subtle question can expose hidden motives. A composed demeanor can shift the emotional climate of an entire room. Others, unaware of the depth of perception before them, respond intuitively, following the currents the empath has carefully guided without realizing it. This is the alchemy of influence, turning understanding into effect, perception into action, empathy into silent command. Consider the healed empath in a room of decision-makers, each vying for advantage, each maneuvering for position. They do not compete with aggression, nor do they seek to dominate openly. Instead, they operate like a shadow strategist, perceiving every angle, calculating every move, and guiding outcomes without confrontation. They know when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to allow others to reveal their intentions unwittingly. Their presence alone commands attention, not through force, but through the magnetic authority of awareness and insight. They have become a quiet pivot around which others' actions revolve, shaping choices without ever needing to assert dominance overtly. Transmutation into influence also transforms relationships. The healed empath no longer simply absorbs the emotions or desires of others. They leverage them. They can inspire, persuade, and motivate, not through coercion, but through alignment. By understanding what drives each individual, by perceiving the unspoken needs and fears, they craft interactions that lead others to act in ways favorable to their own strategic goals. Influence, in this sense, is invisible but powerful. It is the difference between commanding attention through force and guiding decisions through perception. The healed empath becomes both the unseen hand and the guiding presence, orchestrating outcomes with subtle precision. Yet influence is not wielded indiscriminately. The healed empath knows that power without discernment invites chaos and risk. They act with calculated intent, conserving their energy, choosing the situations where their perception can create the greatest impact. They understand timing as acutely as strategy. The slightest misalignment can dissipate influence and expose vulnerability. Through patience, observation, and selective engagement, they ensure that every action is optimized, every word weighted, every gesture aligned with their purpose. In this way, their empathy is not a liability, but the ultimate tool of strategy, shaping reality while remaining invisible, navigating human currents with the precision of a master tactician. Imagine the healed empath moving through social, professional, and intimate spaces as a force that is felt but not seen, a presence that guides without appearing to guide, a mind that anticipates before others act. Their understanding of emotion, their ability to detach strategically, and their disciplined boundaries converge, allowing them to transmute sensitivity into silent influence, perception into quiet authority, and intuition into subtle domination. They no longer merely react to the world, they shape it. Their very awareness becomes a lever, their insight a weapon, their presence a silent command that others follow naturally, unaware of the depth of control the empath has cultivated through years of deliberate transformation. And so the journey of the healed empath reaches its apex. From a soul adrift in the emotional tides of others, they have risen to mastery first over themselves, then over the currents around them. Their emotions are no longer chains but instruments. Their detachment is not coldness but strategy. Their boundaries are not walls but fortresses, guarding the most precious resource of all, their energy and focus. And from this foundation emerges the ultimate transformation, influence that is invisible yet undeniable, authority that commands without force, power that flows quietly, unassailable yet profoundly felt. The healed empath becomes both observer and architect, feeling deeply yet acting decisively, sensing every undercurrent, shaping outcomes, and navigating the world with précision. Few can comprehend. This is the true metamorphosis, sensitivity forged into strength, empathy refined into strategy, and the heart of one who once gave endlessly transformed into the mind of one who now guides effortlessly. The healed empath does not merely survive. They thrive, unseen but commanding, subtle but sovereign, a master of a world that once threatened to consume them.